It was unprecedented in the Arab world. The people rose up against their president. Egypt, the largest and most influential Arab country, would lead the Arab Spring. 4 years later, Egyptians do not have the democracy, prosperity, and freedom they expected. Hosni Mubarak, former Air Force commander, became president of Egypt in 1981.
From day one, Mubarak ruled us by torture chambers, by martial law, by state security police, which was cracking down on dissent, surveilling us all the time, monitoring us.
Egypt's foreign allies ignored the brutality of Mubarak's regime. He was kept in power by his central security police, which had no other purpose. Half of Egypt's population lived on $2 a day. Government subsidized bread, electricity, and oil. Mubarak created the illusion of democracy. He permitted opposition political parties and media, but made sure they were too weak to threaten him.
We did not feel that we could overcome this strong regime. We felt that things were bad and we were right, but that we had no power.
Tourists enjoyed the exotic glitter, but Mubarak's Egypt was dark and corrupt. Billions of dollars in public funds ended up in the pockets of public officials. Egyptians were known as patient, tolerant, apathetic. A Western coalition, led by Americans, invaded Iraq in 2003, unleashing a furious reaction in the Arab world. Egyptians came into the streets. Opposing the invasion was permitted, but when crowds chanted, "Mubarak, leave," the arrests began.
After that, some Egyptians began to think to themselves, why do we go out and make demonstrations because of Iraq and Palestine, but not for ourselves? We also need democracy and freedom.
Mubarak was certain to win a fifth term in 2005. His son, Gamal, held the most important post in the ruling National Democratic Party and was being positioned to succeed his father as president. In 2004, a few educated and affluent Egyptians openly opposed Mubarak for the first time. They called their movement Kafaya, enough. They campaigned against a constitutional amendment to allow opposition presidential candidates. But the amendment had a hidden purpose.
The amendment was made so that the heir to Mubarak would be Gamal Mubarak. And all the symbols of this regime were aiming towards this. So our slogan was, no to extending his term, no to the inheritance, illegitimate.
Kafaya's members were energetic, but few. At rallies, they were vastly outnumbered by police, risking arrest and beatings. They were audacious.
It was shocking for millions of Egyptians to find those young, crazy activists of Kifaya in downtown Cairo burning Mubarak's posters, making fun of Mubarak, making fun of his son.
In the 2005 elections, opposition campaign billboards created the appearance of democratic reform. But only 1 in 4 Egyptians bothered to vote. Only 5% in large cities. Voters say they stayed away because the outcome was rigged. Mubarak won with 88%.
The regime knew that if there were clean elections, that they would lose. An official told us candidly, your demands are legitimate, but this means you want to overthrow the regime. Because if there were clean elections, an independent judicial system, then Hosni Mubarak would be out.
In the countryside and smaller cities, starting in 2006, Mubarak faced a threat that couldn't be fixed by rigging elections. At the largest factory in Egypt, 27,000 textile workers defied the official government unions and went on strike, demanding bonuses they were promised but never received. They occupied the factory compound, stopping production completely. After only 3 days, the state-owned company agreed to all their demands and more.
The workers of Mahalla, 27,000 workers, went on strike. They were able to reclaim the right to strike in 2006 from the gang of businessmen under the leadership of Mubarak, and had the strike days counted as paid leave.
Across the Nile Delta and across Cairo and in Alexandria, virtually every single textile mill in Egypt went on strike demanding the same gains as Mahalla. And the militancy started spilling over to the other sectors. The cement workers occupied their mills. Nurses were going on strike. Garbage collectors were going on strike. Every single sector.
The regime thought that as long as the demands were kept narrowly defined and linked to pay raises, labor contracts, then this is something that we can respond to positively because that's the way you contain these protests. That backfired completely because the workers participating in these protests then walk out with a sense of victory, that they challenged the authorities and they won.
Young political activists, many from the Kafaya movement, recognized the potential of Egypt's militant workers and looked for ways to recruit labor into their political struggle.
I got very excited about the idea of a strike in Mahalla, which evolved into a general strike all over Egypt. This is where the April 6 movement emerged, which from the very beginning showed solidarity with the workers of Mahalla, then farmers and fishermen. Each week, we went to a protest in a province and joined the protesters and talked to them about politics.
We wanted to talk to them one by one, trying to mobilize them. We wanted them to raise their economic demands to a higher level, to be against the regime, against Mubarak. We told them they won't achieve their own demands, their economic demands, until Mubarak's regime leaves.
YouTube videos by the April 6 youth movement featured a clenched fist on banners, posters, and T-shirts. The raised fist had been used by liberation movements for decades. April 6 borrowed the version used by a Serbian resistance group. The April 6 movement took its name from the date of a planned strike by textile workers. When the strike was crushed, Mahalla revolted. The date, April 6, became the battle cry for youth resistance. Workers were reluctant to join with the April 6 youth, whose middle-class perspectives were far from their bread-and-butter concerns. But in time, workers realized their only choice was to oppose Mubarak.
The middle class was afraid it might collapse. That caused the entire society to look around and think that the Mubarak regime was their enemy number one. People wondered whether they could confront his regime, especially with a police force of 1 million. And we said, how are we going to face this police force?
Exposing and fighting police abuse had become the specialty of a dozen modest Egyptian law offices. In late 2006, Nasser Amin, a lawyer who saw human rights law as a weapon against Mubarak's police, took on an unusual case.
We would always hear about torture, but we never saw it because it happened in closed places. But with Imad, it was the first time there was torture that had been actually documented on video with sound.
Police had intended to use the video to intimidate and extort bribes. Imad Kebir had been arrested when he tried to help his cousin in an argument with police. Without even knowing his name, lawyers spent 5 months finding him.
This man himself, who was tortured, Imad, was extremely afraid of me. So it was a very difficult task for me to convince him that he should defend himself and claim his rights.
A year after Kebir was arrested and tortured, the case came to trial. It was a novelty to see accused police officers in the defendant's cage. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch had publicized the case, which forced Egypt's media to report it.
راح حطيت على المؤخرة بتاعتي وفضل يقول لي انت قول انت كذا وكذا ماشي انت خول انت مرة ما فيش حد عنده قرابة امك كذا وابوك كذا.
Two policemen were found guilty and sentenced to 3 years at hard labor. The high-profile trial showed that a key pillar of Mubarak's power could be successfully challenged. An unexpected uprising against police abuse erupted in mid-2010. Young people poured into the streets carrying photographs of Khaled Said, a 28-year-old who was beaten to death by police. A photo of the disfigured corpse circulated on the internet. A Facebook page, We Are All Khaled Said, mobilized hundreds of thousands of young people.
Khaled Said murder was the turning point in terms of the participation of youth. Much bigger groups of youth participated, especially those who were not particularly involved in street activism and in direct confrontations with the police and the regime. And I think starting from the movement of Khaled Said, we realized that very soon something's going to happen.
In the November elections, turnout was even lower than usual. Lines were short, but the wait was long, a sure sign of vote fraud. Complacent NDP officials made no effort to hide their manipulations. Ballot box stuffing was captured by cell phone cameras as party officials methodically marked ballots.
Even compared to the previous election in 2005, it was, the rigging and was much worse, and the results were 97% for the ruling party.
الانتخابات دي مش نزيهة، فين هي النزاهة؟ لما كانوا بيعلنوا فوز اللي ماسكين الدولة.
The crooked election united Kafaya, the Muslim Brotherhood, the April 6 youth, the entire opposition. They disagreed on most issues, but united against a common adversary, the security forces who kept Mubarak in power. The Khalid Said Facebook page called for a nationwide protest against police on Police Day, a national holiday. January 25th, 2011.
We started to prepare ourselves. We started to print out thousands of flyers and send thousands of emails. We asked people to tell their friends and their neighbors that there will be an uprising against the police on the 25th.
No single party or organization was behind the Police Day protests. Anger at police brutality was enough to mobilize almost everyone.
Everything we were doing was actually a contribution to something massive. Eventually, a press interview, a court case, a successful sit-in, and suddenly everything falls in place, and you have a movement that is not organized, has no leadership, and has no vision or roadmap for change, but that has the sheer power of mobilization, and that's all you needed.
Police Day protests were 3 weeks away when events in Tunisia, thousands of miles away, forced a change of plans. Mohamed Morsi, a seller of fruits and vegetables, had been harassed by police for years. When his complaints were ignored, he poured gasoline on himself and lit a match. Bouazizi's gesture of desperation touched off a national protest. Tunisian President Ben Ali fled the country after 24 years in power. News of Tunisia's revolution electrified Egypt.
The reaction on the street, you could literally walk on that night when Ben Ali left in the street and you could hear people talking about, this is coming. I heard some person saying this has to come, very soon it will be here.
Within 24 hours, the Khalid Said Facebook page no longer called for a protest against police. It called for a revolution.
I was getting news that similar protests were happening elsewhere outside of Cairo. And that's when I started texting and calling people, telling them to come, because I thought this was a glorious day that we should not miss.
Police have orders not to attack protesters, just stop them from going downtown. But police are unprepared for such numbers coming from all directions. "4 p.m. They've taken Tahrir Square. They have no plan for what to do next.
The moment we reached Tahrir, that was just like euphoria. And finding thousands and thousands of people coming from everywhere, and that the marches from other neighborhoods made it to Tahrir as well, I had no clue or idea or faith that this is going to still turn into revolution.
5 p.m. Police begin to clear the square.
I will protest till they leave. I will protest till they leave. All of them. All of the system.
Egyptians, known for apathy and passivity, have surprised themselves. 10 years of strikes, protests, and encounters with police have prepared them for this day.
Someone shouted, "الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام." The people want the fall of the regime. And it resonated with everyone because it had this amazing power of the people demand.
I had goosebumps when I heard it. First, I couldn't figure it out. The words didn't add up, and I could hear الشعب يريد, but I didn't figure out first, hear what. And the minute I figured it out, I said, oh my God, this is, we're calling for this. We're going all the way to ask for the downfall of the regime. And it touched a nerve, and it spread throughout.
"200 police vehicles, 10,000 riot police, and 3,000 special forces enter the square and the surrounding area. A few protesters stay in the square overnight. But security forces are regaining control of the city. Resistance leaders have spent the night planning how to sustain their momentum. They are organizing a much bigger protest 2 days from now, on Friday. Egypt sleeps late on Friday mornings, the Muslim holy day. Early risers discover that cell phones, text messaging, and the internet are shut down. Communal prayers at Cairo's mosques are jammed. The regime has instructed the imams to preach against demonstrations and disobedience. Most preachers ignore the orders. After prayers, the congregations surge into the street.
We were like an advancing army, taking one square after the other, one square after the other. And I remember like halfway to Tahrir, I mean, I didn't know how many we were, I was in the front and, we were chanting and charging. And then suddenly, I looked back, I was like, bloody hell. I mean, no words can describe it. I mean, I couldn't see the end of the protest. I mean, they were just thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands.
In late afternoon, only one entrance to Tahrir Square is still blocked. Qasr el-Nil Bridge, a link to the western part of the city.
On the 28th of January, when we were on the Qasr el-Nil Bridge, that was a moment when I felt that I am happy to die for this, and we are not going to go back. We have to persevere, and we have to make it to Tahrir Square and, sit in until he leaves.
I went up to the 10th floor in front of the bridge and I started videotaping the scene of the beating. At 4 p.m. exactly, I saw the police force starting to collapse in the middle of the bridge.
As the sun goes down, police on the bridge lose radio contact with commanders. Outnumbered 2 to 1, they retreat. After dark, police vanish completely. In their absence, the army now appears.
I mean, at least for me, I wasn't sure. I was like, we're either going to be massacred or they're not going to be able to do so because it could be their mom, their sister. I mean, the Egyptian army is made up of the people. So it was the people's way to kind of corner the army by saying, like, you are on our side. The army and the people are one hand.
Along the Nile, the headquarters of the ruling National Democratic Party is in flames. No one is enforcing the law. At 1 in the morning, Mubarak goes on television.
وأقول من جديد أنني لن أتهاون في اتخاذ أي قرارات تحفظ لكل مصري ومصرية أمنهم وأمانهم.
Mubarak's tough talk is intended to show he's still in charge. But with the army in the streets, it's not clear who's in control. The military command issues a statement. The presence of the army is to ensure your safety and well-being. The armed forces will not resort to the use of force against our great people.
For the first time ever, I suppose, our very oppressive police had disappeared. And immediately, citizen security committees were mushrooming everywhere. They came out everywhere, protecting property, very spontaneously, very, very spontaneously.
اللي المفروض تحمي الشعب دي راحت فين؟ الجيش لوحده مش كفايه ومش عامل حاجه.
The square becomes a tourist attraction. Police functions are performed by volunteers, checking visitors for firearms and knives. Mubarak's opponents never expected to get this far.
Says Mubarak is under my shoes.
Although the army is stationed throughout the city, a few protesters confront a remnant of the security police guarding the Interior Ministry. Soldiers are caught between the revolutionaries and the police. For the first time, the people are not afraid of the police. The police don't like their new status. It seems unlikely that young revolutionaries can defeat Mubarak. But by the fourth day, they've been joined by Egypt's oldest and most experienced opposition group, the Muslim Brotherhood.
The government and the regime always use the Brotherhood as a scapegoat. If the Brotherhood had organized everything and announced they were going into the streets, the government would have used violence and suppression against it, on the pretext that the Brotherhood is a violent group.
The brothers avoid confrontation, working cautiously toward an Islamic society. Officially outlawed, they ran as independents in the 2005 parliamentary elections and won 87 seats. They've cultivated a reputation as uncorrupted and pious, as compared to Egypt's rulers. Their slogan, Islam is the solution.
We thought that the change would come through Islamists. So we were surprised by these youth with non-Islamist demands that everyone agreed on. I think they taught us a very important lesson. We must rise above ideologies. We have to act as one hand and agree on the demands. They won't unite with me if the slogan is Islam is the solution. They will only agree that freedom is the solution, democracy is the solution, justice is the solution, and dignity is the solution.
Mubarak addresses the country on the night of February 1st.
إن حسني مبارك الذي يتحدث إليكم اليوم يعتز بما قضاه من سنين طويلة في خدمة مصر وشعبها. فيه عشت وحاربت من أجله ودافعت عن أرضه وسيادته ومصالحه وعلى أرضه أموت وسيحكم التاريخ علي وعلى غيري بما لنا أو علينا. إن الوطن باق والأشخاص زائرون.
Mubarak promises not to seek re-election. He says he intends to serve out his term, another 8 months.
الخطاب عاطفي موجه لشعب طيب مسكين مغمى عليه بس احنا فوقنا. احنا مش مغمى علينا خلاص ولا احنا فاقدين الوعي. هو يمشي مش هنمشي هو يمشي مش هنمشي.
In morning light, away from the square, Mubarak's speech has aroused genuine sympathy, shifting momentum away from the protests.
هو ده الصح اللي هو قاله الرئيس ان هو يكون موجود يكمل بقيه المده بتاعته وبعد كده نختار اللي احنا هنختاره.
Until now, Mubarak partisans have stayed away from Tahrir Square. The army stands aside as thugs assault the protesters. Even soldiers come under attack. Mubarak's ruling party organizes a charge of horses and camels recorded by foreign television cameras. The scene is ignored by Egyptian state television.
The day before that, people were actually leaving Tahrir because they were more convinced with Mubarak's speech that he gave, and that fine, we can wait and give him the 6 months and he resign. A lot of people actually left. So we were losing Tahrir Square. We were losing the people and we were losing the place. But then the next morning when they did that, they provoked everyone. So the numbers that had left came back.
I mean millions. Millions went out into the street, unaware of any class differences. There was the spirit of revolution, the spirit that inspired people to sacrifice their lives and to engage in self-denial and to show the best and the most beautiful of themselves.
Food, water, and medical services are organized as protesters prepare for a long struggle.
I remember it distinctly, 5th or 6th day, when we could see what it is we have accomplished. You know, that we were telling each other, lift up our heads. It's something to be proud of. We've accomplished something, and We're talking to ourselves, we're talking to each other. Because I think what happened is momentous. It was something that in the long history of Egypt has never happened before.
One of the most attractive signs of the Egyptian revolution was a non-violent character. It attracted people to participate. It sustained their participation. When you turn to violence, you risk popular participation and definitely participation of the middle class.
We were worried that we're going to become, some sort of a museum where a lot of people would actually come and watch what's going on in Tahrir. A lot of good things are being said about these people. We had managed to change the image, but not the facts on the ground. So people would come and watch what was going on, buy some food and drinks, and then they go home, right? But then they're counted, right? So that was good for us, but not enough.
Egypt's banks are closed. Workers are sent home. Tourists disappear. At the strategic Suez Canal, on the 16th day, technicians strike in solidarity with the Tahrir protests. Strikes spread quickly to workers in military production, public transport, oil, hospitals, railroads.
On Wednesday, when these mass strikes started, that's when I knew it's over. It's over. I mean, I knew, khalas, it's done, more or less.
A presidential speech is set for the night of February 10th. Expecting a resignation, Egyptians begin celebrating.
أتوجه إليكم جميعا بحديث من القلب، حديث الأب لأبنائه وبناته. أقول لكم إنني أعتز بكم رمزا لجيل مصري جديد. لقد كنت شابا مثل شباب مصر الآن عندما تعلمت شرف العسكرية المصرية والولاء للوطن والتضحية من أجله. أفنيت عمرا دفاعا عن أرضه وسيادته. شهدت حروبه.
Mubarak's fatherly ramblings are not what they want to hear. Rumors are circulating that the army will remove him against his will.
The army takes over or doesn't take over, he has to leave. We don't mind that the army takes over. It's all right by us, but let him leave.
The 18th day passes. At 6 p.m., Omar Suleiman, an army intelligence officer, makes a public announcement.
قرر الرئيس محمد حسني مبارك تخليه عن منصب رئيس الجمهورية وكلف المجلس الأعلى للقوات المسلحة لإدارة شؤون البلاد والله الموفق والمستعان.
لأي واحد هيحكم في أي بلد حتى مش في مصر إن الشعب يقدر يشيل الناس بثورة سلمية.
In the 18 days leading to Mubarak's resignation, 846 protesters were killed. The revolution is not finished. It's already in danger. Egypt has no president. In Tahrir Square, Revolutionaries and their tents are removed on orders of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, SCAF. SCAF will run the country until elections. Parliament is dissolved. The Constitution is suspended.
After Mubarak left and SCAF took over, we felt that that's it, you know? That the people are going to rule and the revolution has been successful and that we're going to determine our future, the people's will. But in those 2 weeks afterwards, gradually we discovered that SCAF had started to assume control and governance.
The soldiers are welcomed. But now that Mubarak is out, the generals have a new agenda, and it has nothing to do with the revolution.
Many people thought that, well, even if they are Mubarak's generals, I mean, they are retiring anyways, they are old people, and they have seen, you know, the power of Tahrir Square and the power of the Egyptian people. They're not gonna mess with us.
Revolutionaries went into the streets. But it was military generals who gave Mubarak the final push. Popular protest gave them cover for a quiet coup that stopped Mubarak's son from succeeding him. It's the only goal the military and the revolutionaries share.
I don't believe an army would ever lead a country from oppression to democracy. So from day one, from the 29th of January, actually, when they said the army is there around us to protect us, I was like, oh, okay. Something is being planned and it doesn't smell good.
Egypt's military wants no political role. The generals strike a bargain with the Muslim Brotherhood, now in imposing new headquarters. The brothers will govern day to day. Behind the scenes, the military will hold the real power.
Because they had been persecuted and imprisoned, or because of their political inexperience or naivety, the Brotherhood leadership decided on the easy solution and sided with the military as the superior power. This was a point of disagreement between us. Which is stronger, the military or the people? They bet on their relations with the military.
We have had military rule in Egypt for 60 years now, since the 1952 coup d'etat. But there was always this cover-up where the administration appeared civilian. The removal of Mubarak has just shown the reality.
Protesters returned to the square through spring and summer, denouncing martial law. And the security police who are still in their jobs after killing over 800 protesters. Military rule has become unpopular.
I would say I want them to step down now. They need to move on. They haven't been doing a good job running the country these past few months, and I don't see them doing a good job the coming few months. We need a civil state. We need civilians representing the country, the population, to run it.
الموجودين في الميدان دول برضو سيتم إخلاء الميدان منهم واحنا حريصين على كده لعودة الحياة إلى طبيعتها بميدان التحرير بكل حزم وبكل قوة.
As soldiers repeatedly clear the square, bystanders join in to help them. Most people are tired of revolutionary chaos.
We left the square. That was our biggest mistake. We should have occupied it until we had imposed our conditions on them. The second mistake was that some of us trusted SCAF, and we thought they could help us bring change. The third mistake, in my view, was our inability to organize ourselves as revolutionary forces.
There will be times where there are victories, times where there will be defeats, And the barometer for whether we're going forward or backwards should not be Tahrir Square and how many people you pull together in Tahrir Square. We are doomed if we don't take Tahrir to the factories, to the university campuses, and to the workplaces in general.
Little is left of the revolutionary fervor. The Muslim Brotherhood no longer joins in street actions. The momentum is gone.
People got tired a lot. People got tired, and they wanted to settle down and be stable. This is a mistake that some groups made lately, because over and over, staging a lot of demonstrations without organization and without popular support caused these marches to be ineffectual and repelled people.
Only small crowds gather when Hosni Mubarak goes on trial for corruption and conspiracy to kill protesters. Mubarak is yesterday's news. Egypt's autocratic military rulers are the new target. In early October, hundreds of Coptic Christians marched to Maspero, state broadcasting headquarters, to protest the burning of a church. They are attacked by soldiers. Armored personnel carriers intentionally drive directly into the crowd. News of the gruesome massacre shocks both Muslims and Christians. The military's honeymoon is over.
I personally took part as a member of the National Human Rights Council in the fact-finding commission at Maspero. And I could not whitewash the crimes committed at Maspero. And I said that the commander of the military police should be sent to trial because this is premeditated homicide they committed.
New street protests erupt when SCAF attempts to control the drafting of a new constitution. Anti-SCAF protesters are attacked in Mohamed Morsi Street near Tahrir. Medical teams call it systematic revenge, intended to kill and injure, not just disperse the protests. Parliamentary elections are set to begin in a week. Civic forces demand a delay, saying it would be wrong to hold elections while protesters are still being killed. A Muslim Brotherhood leader rejects any delay.
When they told him that they were against the post-revolution parliamentary elections, mentioning the tension and deaths resulting from the Mohammed Mahmoud clashes, he said the elections must be held. And he was focused on the elections, no matter whether the people were dying or anything else.
The Brotherhood is adamant on elections as scheduled, knowing that any delay could damage their prospects. 40 protesters are killed, and the political campaigns continue. SCAF agrees with the brothers, who call the protesters traitors and saboteurs.
الالتزام بإجراء الانتخابات البرلمانية في توقيتاتها المحددة والانتهاء من انتخاب رئيس الجمهورية قبل نهاية شهر يونيو 2012.
SCAF's generals believe that parliamentary elections will end the anti-military street actions and restore their credibility. Egypt's freest elections in over 30 years attract even the skeptics.
I definitely have a lot of doubts, and just like I heard someone on television saying yesterday that these elections are the victory of hope over reason, because according to all reason, we don't really think that it's going to be a fair process, but we really hope for that to change.
Election observers report vote buying and fraud, but irregularities don't affect the outcome. Islamists, including the Brotherhood, win 70%. Ultra-conservative Salafi candidates win 27%, the second largest bloc.
Nobody expected in this parliamentary election that it would be, 90% revolutionary. Of course, it's going to be the biggest opposition that had already existed under the Mubarak regime, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. So it was no surprise to us. And these were elections that were engineered by SCAF. So whatever result would obviously benefit the existing regime.
After the pause for elections, anti-SCAF protests resume. Security forces are more aggressive than ever.
A colleague came in with this newspaper, with the front page, a girl being stripped out of her clothes. Said, let's do something to make this more obvious to people. So if it's just on a newspaper, let's put it on videos or something. And then someone said, and let's call it kadibun.
Askar Kasibun, military liars, uses videos to expose military and police abuse of non-violent demonstrators.
القوات المسلحة ليس عندها منهجية في استخدام العنف.
Going into the streets with portable projectors, volunteers show scenes that regime-controlled TV has suppressed. Military violence, juxtaposed with military denials.
This is the main reason behind the lack of credibility of the SCAF. Because everybody saw these events, and everybody saw SCAF denying it. So people are questioning, why are you lying to me? And also, if you are lying about this, that I saw and everybody else saw, when do you actually speak the truth?
It's all about the army keeping its very, very privileged status, where it's not held accountable to anyone, where the generals hang on to their huge gains, their villas, their cars, their millions in the banks, their commissions on everything, and
In the new parliament, the Brotherhood has a commanding majority, which it uses to expand military privilege, a reward for the military-sponsored elections that brought the Islamist brothers to power. Reform is not on the agenda.
These Islamist forces are actually not revolutionary. They're just conservative. They don't want change. And for them, for people to take to the streets, talk to each other, assert their will, this is something that stands against everything that they stand for. So they also found themselves to see, paradoxically, eye to eye with the military. They're not really for reforming the security sector. They're not keen on curtailing the power of the army. So they were actually good bedfellows as far as the army is concerned.
On the first anniversary of their revolution, protesters come back.
people took to the streets and started chanting down with the military. Hundreds of thousands, millions, nationwide. We were all surprised. Everyone was surprised My guess is the Supreme Council for Armed Forces was surprised by the huge turnout. So at that point, I realized the revolution is still ongoing.
As the presidential election campaign begins, the Brotherhood announces it will field a candidate, which it had promised not to do. A dozen candidates split the first-round votes, requiring a runoff between the top two. One of them is Ahmed Shafiq, a former Air Force commander who says Mubarak is his role model. Shafiq's opponent is Mohamed Morsi, a high official of the Muslim Brotherhood, head of the Brotherhood's political party, the FJP.
In the runoff, it was between Morsi and Shafiq. We didn't support Shafiq at all because that would mean the revolution would be totally lost. He was a military man and part of the old regime. So we had to support his opponent, who was Morsi, in order to defeat Shafiq.
Morsi wins with 51% of the vote, only because many Egyptians are terrified by the thought of a Mubarak loyalist as president.
Now, finally, we have a president who's an Islamist. This, for me, is the golden opportunity to undermine his ideas by showing them for the vacuous ideas that they are. They've always been vacuous. We've always tried to argue this, and they would always come back and say, just give us a chance. Okay, now you have a chance.
SCAF puts on a show to transfer power to the new Brotherhood president. But the generals still control the national budget. The military budget remains a secret, and the military holds veto power over the constitution being drafted. 3/4 of the Constituent Assembly, now writing the Constitution, are Islamists, dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood.
When I was in the Constituent Assembly, I had friends and acquaintances from different political parties who criticized me and said, "Why are you being part of this? You know the majority of the assembly are brothers." So my response was, "Give us a chance and let us try. We might produce a good constitution. Maybe we can exercise pressure from within the assembly so we can produce a good constitution."
The work begins cordially. But as the weeks pass, civic forces and minorities are overruled by the Islamist majority. By October, it's clear the new constitution will be by Islamists, for Islamists, with no input from anyone else.
A lot of principles were agreed on. But all of a sudden, just before the referendum, all these agreements were changed. That was the main reason many people, including myself, withdrew from the Constituent Assembly.
They mentioned something about equality, right to free expression, right of assembly, right to free movement, the right to public participation, not to be subjected to murder, respect for rule of law. I mean, all types of right. However, they added a clause at the end of this, saying that all these rights we just listed cannot be exercised in contradiction of the principles and doctrines of Islamic law, meaning all these were annulled.
Constitution drafting is entirely in the hands of the brothers and their Islamist allies. When threatened by a legal challenge to the drafting process, President Morsi decrees that his actions are final, beyond even the reach of the courts. He has placed himself above the law.
لن نقبل أن يفرض دستور صنعته جماعة أو جزء من الشعب المصري بدون توافقاتنا، ولن نقبل ديكتاتورية يفرضها هذا الإعلان غير الدستوري.
طيب اللي موافق على أغلبية مجلس النواب منفردا.
Islamists vote out their constitution in a single all-night session. The Brotherhood has destroyed its image as an uncorrupt, clean meritocracy, which it took 80 years to build.
They don't act as if their presence in power after the revolution is democratic or a product of the revolution. They think that this was a historical opportunity for them to seize the Egyptian state institutions in order to achieve their own particular project, the group project, the Islamic project in general. And this is against democracy.
The brothers and Egyptian politicians in general, but especially the brothers, understand democracy as a means to determine who rules, not how to rule.
The presidential palace is now the target of demonstrators, night after night. They're angry that Morsi has broken his promise to listen to other factions.
لان احنا خلاص احنا بقالنا 30 سنه بنتخدع بما فيه الكفايه فمش هنقدر ان احنا كمان نصدق مرسي بان هو يعني هيفضل ان هو قاعد على الكرسي ومش هيسيبه الاخوان طول عمرهم نفسهم يوصلوا للحاجه دي.
Right after his elections, some liberal voices, some leftist voices, some activists like April 6th called on him to take his promise with regard to national consensus seriously. That you really need to have more than your movement. You really need to have more than the Brotherhood on board. You cannot depend on the Brotherhood and its allies. It's going to be too little in a country of 90 million with such a complex web of power relations. Did he listen? No, he never listened.
Barricades go up around the presidential complex. Morsi and his brothers adopt a bunker mentality, convinced that everyone is against them. They appeal for members of the Brotherhood to come and defend the palace.
He suspects that the police are not with him and that the police will not defend the presidential palace and that the presidential guard may also not be enough to protect the president. But then to call on to members of his group to take to the streets armed to defend the palace, that's a recipe for civil war.
At the presidential palace, the standoff continues. Instead of trying to diffuse the tension, the Brotherhood goes on the offensive, hiring thugs to attack demonstrators. In one night, 14 protesters are killed. Copies of the draft constitution are available everywhere. Only a few voters actually read it.
They never read the constitution. These people just trusted the brothers because the brothers told them, if you say yes, it will bring stability and the economy will improve. Others said, this is about religion and Islamic law. Say yes because you're saying yes to Islamic law. But in fact, this is not about Islamic law, the economy, or stability. This is about a constitution that will govern the country for years, and there should be justice, liberties, and national pride. It should preserve human dignity. This is what we demanded.
In a popular referendum on the Constitution, turnout is barely a third of eligible voters. 63% vote yes, but low turnout means that only 1 in 5 have approved. It's not a referendum on the Constitution. It's a no-confidence vote on the Brotherhood.
نبقى ما كناش عايزين فصيل واحد هو اللي حاكم، كنا عايزين نبقى ايد واحده زي ما نزلنا في الثوره يوم 25 يناير. كنا كلنا مع بعض، ما كانش فيه اخوان ومدنيين وليبراليين، كنا كلنا سوا. ما اعرفش ايه اللي حصل علشان نتفصل كده ونبقى في فصيل هو اللي حاكم. ما ايه الفرق بين الاخوان والحزب الوطني؟ في فرق؟ ما فيش.
Gas lines and electrical outages become common. Prices and unemployment rise. Many who voted for Morsi say they feel cheated.
عمرنا تاريخ حياتي وتاريخ حياة الناس اللي حواليا كلهم ما شفناش أزمة مرت على مصر للبنزين. احنا بقينا عراق، عمرنا ما شفنا. انتوا شفتوا محطة بنزين بالمنظر ده؟ البلد كلها واقفة.
A faltering economy is one sign of the Muslim Brotherhood's ineptitude, along with its secretive, top-down decision-making and disdain for consensus. Seeing its economic interests threatened, the military begins quietly planning to remove President Morsi, whose support is down sharply even in rural areas, his traditional base.
Every day, the problems got worse and worse. The most important thing for them was their organization and the members of their organization, not the Egyptian citizens.
By spring 2013, the military and the media are actively demonizing President Morsi. Government bureaucracy, left over from the old regime, is resisting him. Young people are organizing against him.
We always would gather in downtown because it was very close to Tahrir, which was a symbol of the revolution. And we started talking about what we would do. And so Hassan Shaheen put forth the idea and later developed it, not only to withdraw confidence from Morsi, but how we can call for early elections and push forward for the demands of the street.
An unknown youth organization appears, calling itself Tamarad, Rebellion. Tamarad collects signatures on a petition demanding new presidential elections. It's addressed directly to Morsi. We reject you because there is no security, no justice, no dignity.
The petition form was written in simple language. There wasn't any talk about politics or anything like this. It was very colloquial language. So it was very easy for ordinary people to understand and accept.
Everybody agreed on one thing, that this regime is against the people, and so it must go. So we hoped we would gather 15 million signatures, which would be more than the votes that Morsi received. That was our goal.
Millions signed the petition. Rumors circulate that Tamarad is financed by the military. No one cares. Defeating Morsi is all that matters. A last chance to save the revolution.
I was in a moral crisis. I was like looking around and then I saw these kids with the leaflets for Tamarad. Then I read it and they were asking for early elections. And I said, yes, that's the answer. You know, I don't want him to continue. This is too dangerous for 4 years. I don't think the country can withstand 4 years of this. This is just untenable. And I signed it.
Tamarad calls for a nationwide protest on June 30th, the first anniversary of Morsi's inauguration. Egypt's military claims that 14 million demonstrators are in the streets chanting against Morsi and the Brotherhood. An unlikely alliance of revolutionaries and Mubarak supporters.
By the time of June 30th, when all of these people, so many people, were out in the street, I couldn't even believe the numbers. What I saw on June 30th, I never saw anything like it, not even on January 25th. It was amazing, truly amazing.
The next day, General Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, handpicked by President Morsi as Minister of Defense, issues a stern warning.
وتهيب القوات المسلحة بالجميع بأنه إذا لم تتحقق مطالب الشعب خلال المهلة المحددة فسوف يكون لزاما عليها استنادا لمسؤوليتها الوطنية والتاريخية واحتراما لمطالب شعب مصر العظيم.
The general gives Morsi 48 hours to respond.
وإجراءات
إذا كان الحفاظ على الشرعية ثمنه دمي أنا فأنا مستعد أن أبذل ذلك رخيصا في سبيل هذا الوطن واستقراره حسبة لله سبحانه وتعالى. حسبة له سبحانه وتعالى.
Morsi is defiant. He refuses to call new elections. He vows to protect his constitutional legitimacy. Energized by his defiance, Morsi loyalists don't realize they've already been defeated.
إلا أن خطاب السيد الرئيس ليلة أمس وقبل انتهاء مهلة 48 ساعة جاء بما لا يلبي ويتوافق مع مطالب جموع الشعب.
General El-Sisi announces that the armed forces, responding to the demands of the people, have deposed Mohamed Morsi.
بنشكر الجيش المصري العظيم الذي انحاز للإدارة الشعبية والشرعية والثورية وقال خائن عميل محمد مرسي عيسى العياط الذي هددنا أمس بحرب دموية وإن احنا النهارده انتصرت الإرادة الثورية للشعب.
After only a year, Brotherhood rule is finished. People call it the Second Revolution. But not everyone approves the way it was done.
I identified what happened as a coup, because at the end of the day, you cannot remove an elected president without going back to the ballot box, without going back to elections.
General El-Sisi is a national hero. As in the past, the military has taken advantage of revolutionary sentiment to pursue its own goals.
The army waited until the fruit was completely ripe and picked it. And that's my disagreement with them. They considered themselves the sole power that toppled Morsi. They deprived our movement of its revolutionary character.
The generals appoint an interim civilian president and cabinet. But a frenzy of pro-military sentiment grips the country. Hyper-nationalism and worship of General El-Sisi sweep the country. Support for Egypt's army has fallen since Morsi was deposed, but it's still the most trusted institution in the country.
The middle class in Egypt has been since the 1950s, in a way, educated based on an anti-democratic narrative, the narrative of the hero in uniform, the Nasser narrative. Trust the military hero, trust the military establishment, forget about civilian politicians, forget about civilian political parties, because this narrative is being reactivated and it's undemocratically spirited. People are accepting, well, fine, so here is our savior.
The military says it's fighting terrorists. Morsi partisans say they're defending legitimacy. Both sides are armed. Forced to take sides, most Egyptians choose the army. When General El-Sisi asks for a popular mandate to fight terror, hundreds of thousands come into the streets. Thousands of Muslim brothers are arrested. Even secular revolutionaries who led the 2011 revolution are rounded up.
Obviously, you watch any of the Egyptian media outlets, or you hear the people on the streets, and people are celebrating these arrests. People are saying yistahlo, and yistahlo, means they deserve it. This is not the time to be protesting. This is not the time to be polarizing the state more. This is not the time to be, So this is the concern: is the public opinion is actually eating this up.
The Muslim Brothers declare that Morsi is the legitimate president and establish 2 sit-ins. They vow to stay until Morsi is reinstated. The larger camp in North Cairo swells to 80,000, engulfing an entire neighborhood. Riot police forcibly dispersed the camps on August 14th. General El-Sisi says they threaten national security. Nearly 1,000 Morsi supporters are killed in just a few hours. It's Egypt's Tiananmen Square.
There's very strong evidence that this was premeditated. This is negligent at best and mass killing at worst. The problem is that it is justifiable in the eyes of millions of people, because this was done in people's names. Very explicitly. Sisi said, I need a mandate. And people took to the streets to give him a mandate. And this is what he did with the mandate. So it's a very, very deep scar. This is not something that will be fixed anytime soon.
Sisi, you are a killer! You are a killer! Mad killer! Sisi, we will kill you! We'll slaughter you! Through!
El-Sisi trades his uniform for a business suit and becomes a candidate for president. He has no viable opposition and wins with 98% of the vote on June 8th. The hopes of the revolution are abandoned for the promise of stability.
They want stability at any cost. And they haven't thought it through, that this is only ephemeral stability. Problems haven't been solved. This regime is not offering anything for the future. It's not addressing any positive feeling, actually. This regime only survives on fear. And it is stoking this fear constantly.
Egypt's police state is reborn. Labor unions, human rights groups, the media, and civil society suffer the worst repression in more than 50 years. Egypt's revolutionaries and pro-democracy activists face a long struggle.
The way I understand what is happening now is a reaction to the Egyptian people taking their fates in their hands and saying, we can do this. We're the ones who learned. They're the ones who are not learning anything. We're the ones who are accumulating experience and asking ourselves what went wrong. But something has snapped. Something seriously has snapped in the very foundation of the Egyptian political system. And the Egyptian people are speaking up, and they've tasted what it means. It's been very messy and it's been very bloody. but we know what it takes, and this is too precious to let go of.